Good morning. So let's take a look at this chapter. This chapter is on entrepreneurship, and this is one of my favorite slides. Right, these memes. Right, if you fail, congratulations. Most people don't even try, and sadly, that is absolutely the truth. Um, this fear of failure is just huge within our society, and as a result, we've got a lot of people that could potentially completely change their lives through entrepreneurship that won't even try it because the prospect of failing is just so great. And so for the next couple minutes, I'm just going to try to make the case for entrepreneurship. And then I've got sort of a fun exercise that we're going to get to do. It's one of our assignments this week. So, the case for entrepreneurship is pretty simple. But I'm going to start with a question, right? Excuse me, not a question. Let's start with the definition. What is an entrepreneur? And, this really is funny. Someone who jumps off a cliff and builds a plane on the way down. This tends to be the image that most people have is kind of like, they're just reckless. They just go and they start stuff. And while they're, within society, there is some of this. For the most part, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs are significant planners. And planning is a huge percentage of what entrepreneurs do so that they can mitigate or reduce some of the risks associated with starting a new enterprise. But one step further, entrepreneurs are people that start stuff. And, they're builders, disruptors, innovators, risk takers, and game changers. And, I use that word game changer because that for me is really I think the greatest opportunity. One of my favorite authors and professors is a guy out of Harvard named Clayton Christensen. And we read several of the chapters from one of my favorite books in the entrepreneurship class. And, one of the things that he really argued was this whole concept of changing the game. And he argued that the way you change the game is through product development and pricing, and that you've got the ability to win and by changing the game, changing how the game is played. And so, if we think about entrepreneurs, they're people that are just willing to sacrifice sleep, sanity, and savings to grow an idea. And so, there's this thought, right? Well, gosh, that's great. That's very exciting. But, not everybody is an entrepreneur, right? And so I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to really think about this, during this presentation. Are entrepreneurs born or entrepreneurs made? So are you born with everything that you need to be an entrepreneur, or does it need to be, you go to school and through experience and et cetera, you're made an entrepreneur, right? Which is it, right? I want you to think about that. And so, entrepreneurship is all about ideas. It is all about identifying problems and trying to come up with solutions that could potentially help solve that problem, add value to society, and then obviously, you've the potential to gain the economic reward from that. So, where do these ideas come from? And so, for me, they come from two areas, and this could be different for everybody else. But for me, it's observation and trends. This is where I get my ideas from, right? So we've got, I think I've mentioned before, I've got a team of 4 people. We still work on crazy stuff. 2 of us work on them a lot. I mean, every day. We are looking at different things. We're actually working on some stuff right now that I think could be really intriguing. But so observation and for me, trends are the two big ones. So let's take a look. What does observation mean, right? And so I'm going to ask you a question. What do you see? And the traditional answers. Oh, I see a couch. Personally, I think it's a really cool looking couch. It's got a very 60s, 70s vibe. And I'm going to bet that these little brown parts, that they're sort of raised and hard. I remember being a kid little kid, falling asleep on the couch and waking up with all these little dents in my cheeks because the vinyl couch had little little dents and little points in it. And so I'm having little flashbacks to that. But it looks like a very comfy couch. I'd stick that in my office at the college, right? But what do you see? Everybody's in the couch and you're comfortable and you're going to take a nap. But what Airbnb saw was a place where somebody could just crash. The story of Airbnb is really interesting. They had a couple roommates that saw that there was a big event getting ready to take place at the Moscone Center, that there were no more hotel rooms, that people were complaining about the fact that they were going to have to go stay in Oakland. And they bought some air mattresses and they rented out the air mattresses. And that started Airbnb. That's it. No master plan. They just noticed that there was a need. And Airbnb started off, you could rent your couch. I ride a motorcycle, and I know buddies that were using Airbnb in the early days just to find a couch you could crash on. In some cases, you could get a couch and you could take a shower in the morning, and the expectation is, man, you're out by 8, right? And when you're riding cross country, that's perfect. You don't need anything more than that. And or other guys would, pay somebody. They would pay Airbnb so you could throw your tent up on their lawn, so you were in a safe place, and the police weren't going to give you crap. And so they didn't have a master plan Airbnb. They just saw people have excess space, right? And they need income. And so now Airbnb is, the biggest. We could call them a property management company. They're bigger than Hilton, bigger than Marriott, bigger than all the hotel chains on the planet, but they don't own anything, right? Very interesting. So what do you see, right? So I see flashbacks to a previous life. If you're ever in New York City and it's raining, you're going to see people on the corner begging for a cab. I mean, they're just literally, and cabs are just driving by. And there'll be just lines of cabs driving by people that are just standing on the corner, soaking wet, begging for a cab. And the reason is that those cabs are booked already, but there's nothing more frustrating than that. And so obviously Uber saw, you know what, I could do better than the cab. Instead of standing on the corner, I'm going to give you an app. And I'm going to connect you with, maybe it's not a cab, but it's going to be somebody that can get you into a car pretty quick. I'm going to give you an app that's going to tell you, by the way, they're pulling up, so step outside now. Obviously, Uber's turned into a massive multi-billion-dollar company as a result of this. They saw a problem, and their solution was pretty simple. And by the way, Uber's created tremendous wealth for Uber, but they've also provided some pretty significant economic opportunities for a bunch of people. I know I've got students that have they have class at 8:00 until like 11:05, but they want to have another class until like 3:00. So they go drive Uber, or they go they do something else, and it gives them the opportunity to go make some money, shuttle people back and forth from the Oakland airport. So what do you see? Right? We got a guy saying, "Where's my dinner?" And we got a wife going, "Well, you going to cook it or what, dude?" Right? And you come home from work and you're tired and you're hungry and you just want some chow. And you look in the fridge and there's no leftovers and you're getting tired of eating cereal or you're out of milk, right? And so obviously that became a problem, which DoorDash and Grubhub and Postmates and all these others really saw that. And so there were two problems that they were solving. One is that restaurants recognized not everybody wants to go sit down and eat, man. Sometimes you just want to literally sit on the couch, watch Netflix, and just have a little bit of food and just decompress, right? You don't want to have to put on big boy clothes and go to a restaurant and sit down, right? I don't want to have to comb my hair. Just give me food, man. I'm tired. And so they saw this. And obviously during COVID, these guys just blew up. They really did, because, we couldn't go out. And sometimes, going to Costco to get groceries was a pain in the neck. And And these guys just blew up because they saw an opportunity, right? No master plan. They just saw, hey man, if I go pick up your groceries, will that work? And I've had entrepreneurship students over the last 15 years or so, come up with really interesting ideas along these lines. Like I had one student, and I love the idea, and I still think it could be really interesting. But it was an app that would like send out a notice to everybody and say, everybody, if you're like in a dorm, so everybody on your floor, you'd say, hey, I'm going to Taco Bell. Does anybody want anything? And that people could then immediately like, yeah, pick me up this, pick me up that, pick me up this, pick me up that. And that the way it worked was that people would pay like a little extra. And that the person that said, I'm going to go get Taco Bell, it would pay for their Taco Bell. Or I'm going to go get Starbucks. Does anybody want anything? Right? You get that a lot in companies. And so really interesting, right? So they're derivatives of this idea that I will go get you food and I derive some sort of economic benefit from that. So I really like those. So, so how do you benefit from that? This is observing. This is like really paying attention. What are people trying to do? And how are they behaving? And really just sort of paying attention to that. And trying to figure out, okay, if there's a problem, what would my solution be? Or, even better, how is somebody else trying to solve the problem? And do you have a better option, right? The second is trends. I really, really like trends, right? Because we know for the most part, so we've got a little bit of slowdown now because we've got, this immigration enforcement issue going on. But I think that's going to correct itself pretty quickly. The United States cannot grow without immigration. Without immigrants, our economy will come to a halt, and hopefully at some point, cooler heads will prevail, and we'll recognize that. But our population, for the most part, will continue to grow organically through birth or through immigration, and this is the part that's really interesting: is that Gen Z, for the most part, those of you listening in on this call. You represent the biggest generation, right? And baby boomers are right behind you. And what's interesting is that the boomers are in the retirement age. You are in your growth phase. So we've got, 50% of our population that are either growing or shrinking. And both of those cases, that's where there's massive economic growth. And, where are the opportunities, right? So we know people will, for the most part, get married, have kids, buy houses, adopt dogs, get old, and die. At every one of those phases, there's huge economic opportunity. I mean, look how much people spend on marriages. Right? I think I paid $1,800 all in on my wedding. And, we called it a carving station, but it was pretty much, man, people got a little piece of ham and some bread. It was a nice roll. It wasn't like, Wonder Bread, but now, man, people are spending 20, 30, 40, $50,000 on a wedding. Man, it's a lot of dough. You have kids, you guys are expensive. Kids are expensive. I mean, feed you, clothe you, give you all the electricity you need for all your little electronic stuff. Very, very expensive. Buy houses, that's always a massive opportunity. But where we've got Gen Z and where we've got baby boomers right now, the baby boomers are rolling out of their big houses, and you've got Gen Z are looking to buy their houses. And so, there is this huge opportunity with 50% of our population, right? Adopt dogs. This is one of my favorite industries. The pet industry is just so big. I mean, I'll talk about that in a second. Massive opportunities. You're going to get old. When you get old, different services, you need different services. Like I haven't mowed my lawn it's been decades. I used to have a lawnmower just as I thought, you have a house, you're a man, you need a lawnmower. I haven't had a lawnmower in a long time. I've got a group of guys. They're brilliant. They do a great job. And then when you dying, very sad, but lots of money unlocked when you die. We'll talk about that too. And then on the company side, companies will need capital, hire people, fire people, buy stuff, sell stuff, and grow or fail. At each one of these phases, there's opportunity. But let's talk a little bit about pets, right? The U.S. pet industry, right now, $165 billion a year. It might actually exceed that, right? It's expected in the next 5 years to grow to $228 billion. That, we're in the US. We're a billion here, billion there. It doesn't seem like a lot of money. But if you think about this, right now in the world, we've got between 190, 195 countries. There's probably closer to 225 or 230, but there's some that aren't recognized as countries. What are we going to do? Let's just go with the 195 number. Roughly 125 of that 195 have a GDP, which is total economic output for the whole country, that's smaller than our pet industry. So that means that more than half the countries in the world, like they wake up in the morning, the prime minister or the president, wherever they run the country, that person wakes up and they're like, man, I wish our country was as big as the pet industry in the United States. We spend a ton of money on our dogs, primarily dogs, cats too, but we spend a ton of money on our dogs and fish and parrots, and we really do, right? So how do you benefit from these trends? Follow the data. As you're scrolling, right, whether it's the gram or TikTok or whatever, throw some Bloomberg News in there. Throw some Market Watch in there. Throw some industry information in there. So as you're scrolling, you're going to see stuff, right? And that's great, because then you can start to see, okay, wow, that's interesting. How does that change, or how does that potentially unlock a business opportunity, right? And so, here are some of my favorite ideas. Based on trends and observation, right? So what do you see here, right? So this is Abby. Abby was the most wonderful dog in the world, and she passed several years ago. But she went from the cutest little dog in the world to a moose. And I mean a moose. And but she still thought she was the puppy. She was the 90-pound dog climbing on your lap, and she was just a great dog. There's data that people that have dogs, they live longer. And, so as a result, baby boomers are really the primary spenders, as you can imagine, on pets, right? Because, all the kids finally move out, and you were sad for like 25 minutes, and then we're like, I'm turning that room into a gym. And so the parents, but they have love. And you haven't had grandkids yet. And so they get dogs. And these dogs become a central part of the family, right? Your little furry, your furry child. And as a result, people are the data tells us you live longer when you have a dog. And the big reason for that is unconditional love, right? I come home from school, and Drew, we used to have two puppies, and one of them passed this summer. It was very sad. But Drew will hear me coming up the stairs, and Drew will run to the door and start scratching at the door. And then I come in, and he is so incredibly excited to see me. That unconditional love is brilliant, right? I'd come home and my kids were here, and they'd be, well, what's for dinner, right? And so Drew's like, I just want to love you, right? So people live longer when they have dogs. What's the downside to dogs? Dun, da-da, of course, right? They make little messes. And when I was in business school, I created this little service called, just hypothetical, right? Dog Duty. And this is 2008. So this is almost 20 years old worth of data. And so now, if I was to redo this, this number would be closer to $99 a month, right? And which would make this much bigger. It'd be $100 million market opportunity. And if I was really paying attention, it'd be worth $100 million. And if I could go get 10%, that'd be a business generating $10 million a year. Doing what? Just cleaning up dog poop. And not rocket science. You don't need a master plan. And we know the data tells us that there's roughly 62% of all households have at least one dog. Most people have more than one dog. And the reason for that is that they think the dog is lonely. And so they get him another dog. I'm already thinking it. Drew, it's been a couple months, and they go, oh, does Drew need a little friend? And I'm like, no, Drew doesn't need a little friend. Drew needs another ball to go play with. But we'll see what happens, right? But huge market opportunity just cleaning, people's backyard. One of my other favorites, this was one of our students, one of my former students. And her uncle gave her an RV. Mechanically, the thing was just amazing, but the inside was sort of beat. Her whole idea was, let's turn this thing into a mobile salon. And she had sketched it out. She was a brilliant artist and sketched it out, could have 4 stations. Her original thought was, I'm going to go to business parks and I'm going to do business women, right? You get a little lunch break, come out, you get a mani-pedi, get your hair done. Except that there's really only a couple hours when those people actually could have this done. So we started looking at other markets where maybe there was the potential to work all day. And she, focused in on senior citizen centers. And, and then the whole business model changed. So now there were going to be TVs like you see in the image, right? Running Oprah reruns and serving virgin mimosas. And you could, you get senior citizens, whether you're going to an assisted living facility or you're going to a senior citizen center, they've got money. And so this thing would have printed dough. And she ended up not doing it. I know she did something else. We talked just a second ago about the fact that when people die, there's a lot of money involved in that process. One of my favorite ideas, this was one of mine, was what I was calling the garden. Right now, we have 2 ways that you can go out, right? One is you are buried in a cemetery, and I'm talking 40 grand, right? You got to have the plot, and then there's the vault and the casket and the services. It's 40 grand, right? And the other is to be cremated. And the cremation now is becoming a much more accepted process. And if you were Catholic, you couldn't get cremated. Now you can. And so, but what do you do with the ashes? And the ashes have become the problem, right? Initially, unless you dispose of them, you go out to sea or you go do something, you're left with these ashes. And, they come in a really nice urn, and then the urn gets moved around the house and eventually ends up in the garage, and they end up in like storage facilities. That's why you see every time if you go by those storage facilities, almost everyone's got ashes in it. People don't know what the heck to do with these things when they're done. So my idea was, well, let's take those ashes and let's fold them into the soil and the compost of a garden, and then we could use those ashes to go grow a beautiful garden, right? So instead of going to a cemetery, which is only fun on Halloween, right? Instead of going to a cemetery, you take a walk through the garden, and if you asked us to incorporate your mom into the rose garden, then before you leave, you could snip a rose, right? And be taking a piece of your mom home with you because your mom helped create that rose, right? And so beautiful image. It would make a lot of money. I've not found a city yet that was willing to let us do it. We thought Vallejo was going to let us do it on Mare Island. And ultimately what they wanted us to do was to remove all of the dirt on this 1 acre plot that we wanted to do it on, and put it in cinder block walls because they were worried that the ashes would get into the water supply. At the same time we're talking, there's a dog doing its business right across the street from us. And I looked at this guy and I'm like, you're worried about ashes getting into the water supply? And it was just, fear-based, right? People are like, oh my God, I don't want that in the water. And so maybe someday we'll figure this one out. But I think it could be a really helpful idea. And I think it could really add value to a lot of people that struggle with what do we do with the ashes. So, I started this with a simple question: are entrepreneurs born or are entrepreneurs made? Right? And I will argue every day of the week that we are all born entrepreneurs. And my evidence is here, right here. My evidence is, give any child some Play-Doh, some Legos, some Lincoln Logs, and they will create. the creative component that's needed to be an entrepreneur is present when we're born. It's just that as we age and as we get older, this this need to grow up, this need to act our age, this need to think more seriously, it really tamps down that creativity. There a small percentage are able to sort of retain that. And these are the dreamers, right? People that have the ability to sort of envision stuff that nobody else sees. And so you're born an entrepreneur. What we need to do is figure out how to unlock that. How do we get you to start playing with Play-Doh again and creating because you're born 100%. And I believe that with everything in me. So enough babbling. So the assignment this week is for you to come up with 3 ideas. And I don't want you to come up with, do not be a cafe, nail salon, place where you get your hair cut. No, I don't want you to do that. I want you to be a little bit more creative than that. I want you to really take a few minutes and sketch out some ideas. Look around this next day or two. And assuming you're not watching this video at 11 o'clock and the assignment is due at 11:59, take your time. Look through, yourself. Look at some of the problems you encounter every day. Give me 3 ideas, and let me give you a little bit of meat on those bones. And who knows? I'm going to tell you what. At the college, we've got an entrepreneurship program, entrepreneurship club, and this last semester, one of my business students that is in the entrepreneurship club won our elevator pitch competition. They won $1,000 in cash. So it wasn't even an entrepreneurship student. So unlock your ideas, people. I'm excited to see what you come up with. Peace.